Welcome to the IAP, the Interactive Accessibility Podcast, bringing you the people, technology, and ideas helping to make your world accessible to everyone.
Hey, welcome to the IAP, the Interactive Accessibility Podcast, brought to you by the Paciello Group and its affiliate Interactive Accessibility. I'm your host, Mark Miller. Thank you for helping us keep it accessible. Do us a favor. If you're enjoying the IAP, share it. Tell someone about it. Hey, even link to it from your accessible website. So welcome, everybody. I'm real happy to have a guest on today that we've had before. He's a very important person in the world of accessibility. His name is Joe Devon. And Joe is probably most well known for starting the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which we just had, right? It was a few weeks back. And the Paciello Group, Interactive Accessibility, we participated in it. There was a big event in New York. We actually released our ARC toolkit to the public for free, so you guys can go out there and get that ARC toolkit. It's a very powerful single page set of tools that you can use to help work on and look at the accessibility of your site. So we have Joe to thank for bringing this great day to us, but I don't want to focus on that, Joe, too much today. I really want to talk to you about the world of accessibility and where you think has gotten to at this point. Where do you think it's headed, and anything else that we come up with? So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be back.
Great. So it's been how many years has it been since you and Jensen started GAAD Day?
So this was the eighth one last May 16th.
Wow, that's a lot, right?
Yeah, time flies. It's crazy.
So talk to me about, like, how do you feel that day has changed accessibility over those 8 years? Like, what influence has it had on the world and the way that we look at accessibility, people's awareness, all those things?
It's a great question. I'm not even 100% sure. I feel like more people are aware of it. More people have heard of it. I'm noticing in the conferences that I look at that there's at least one accessibility talk most of the time, which I think is really key. It's not good enough. The WebAIM report came out, and it was a little bit disheartening. And we ourselves came out with a State of Accessibility report, which we're calling SOAR, where we kind of partnered with WebAIM as well. And yeah, it's not as good as it should be, but I feel like it's started a conversation with a lot of people that didn't have it before. It's gotten a lot of press, but I feel like we can do a lot more. Mm.
So do you think that, and I've heard that kind of answer from people before in relation to a lot of things around accessibility outside of accessibility too. Anytime you have an effort like this, you see improvements and you see where it's not improving, and you always want it to be better. Otherwise it wouldn't be a thing. We wouldn't be in it. We wouldn't be trying to do it. So I completely understand that and share that perspective. I feel like there's a lot more work to do. But I also feel like we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for what you've done, because there is a day. I mean, there was a whole event in Times Square that we were a part of. When we released that tool, I mean, just from our perspective, when we released the ARC toolkit, the downloads were insane. The people went nuts for it, and people knew about it because of the exposure it had through GAAD Day. So it is having an effect. I don't know how you would judge what that effect is, but that part of what's pushing things along as far as they've gotten has got to be Global Accessibility Awareness Day. What do you see? Like, we've laid out this picture where improvements have been made. They can always be better. Things can always happen faster. Where do you see the future? What do you see as GAAD's role in the future, and what else might be needed to get things to where you would like to see them?
Great question. I've started like kind of doing this presentation where, because I see a lot of people depressed about the statistics, I just really thought about it the way I would think about any product. And what I've really realized is that the problem is big, and we have a big thing to overcome, which is you need to start with the legal. You need to have the legal foundation, which I think we kind of have. It could be a little bit better, but we kind of have it. Once you have the legal, you have to market it in a way to the businesses, small businesses, large businesses, so that they know it's the law. And then you need to market it to people that are learning how to code and people that already know how to code, so that they understand that they need to do this to comply. Then you need to get to the hearts and minds. You need to get the end user aware, but there's so many steps, and each of these is really hard without a massive budget behind it. And that's the reason I think it's taken so much. So I think we've done some really good steps, but more has to be done. And some people I respect also pointed out that the different contingencies need to work together in order to realize the numbers. Because I don't even remember, yesterday I was speaking to somebody and they felt like they were asking about GAAD and about accessibility, and they were like, the numbers aren't big enough. And I'm like, no, the numbers are big enough. You've got, depending which statistic you look at, it's either 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people have a disability of some kind. And then they all have family, parents, kids, siblings, and those people and caregivers, those people increase that number in terms of who cares about accessibility to a really huge percentage of the population. But because it's different kinds of disabilities, that means that we're not, let's say the audience isn't looking at it as one big number. They're just looking at, okay, you have X number of people who are blind, X number of people who are deaf, X number of people who have mobility impairments, and they're not uniting it as, hey, we need to provide usability for everybody. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think that that's a really good point. And I agree with you that the numbers are there, if you're considering the numbers. And I think the other number, or the other thing that people don't think about when it comes to disabilities is the fact that the baby boomers, my parents, probably your parents, are aging. And as you age, you essentially, right, it's something you collect that you don't want to collect, but you start to collect disabilities, right? My mom is starting to become very arthritic. My dad already has lost hearing in one ear. I'm throwing on and off, readers myself. So who knows where that's leading, right? And it's just a fact of aging. And the really important thing about this generation that's aging now is that they're using technology. So if they get to the point where the technology doesn't allow them to use it, there's going to be some pretty significant problems. My parents literally owned a mom and pop hardware store. So of course they use technology. They were emailing the hardware store had a website. It was an HWI affiliate. They were doing things from a technological standpoint all the time. So even though they're in their 80s, they're all over Amazon. My mom will tell you that she can't do anything from a technological standpoint, but she doesn't realize how good she actually is, and when she can't use a mouse, or when her vision starts to go, or whatever, which will happen, right? It's inevitable. They're going to people are going to start losing a customer, a consumer. And I think that that's one of the big areas. That's one of the big areas from a real ROI standpoint, where it's going to affect people that would be helpful to step back and think about for a lot of groups, and that adds to that list you made, like how much, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But,
and then kind of, I think this is, I don't remember your full question, but I know that there was another angle I kind of wanted to.
I don't remember it either, so
about.
We're good.
It's so funny because GAAD Day, like the whole month surrounding it, and all the travel and all the interviews and whatnot, and talks, like I'm so embedded in it on a daily basis that my head is in it 100%, like 24/7.
Right.
And then you kind of have to take a month off, and then you kind of like lose the momentum of what you were working on. But now that we're doing this, I've been thinking about it a little bit again, and there are a few things. Like I would love, what I want to work on personally in terms of taking it to another level is making a movement where accessibility would become as ubiquitous in software development as the agile methodology is. And I'm not sure yet how to attack that, but I think you have to start with what is your goal. And you can't do anything until you know what your goal is. And I think that's a good way to make people think about it, because it really is, it's usability, and it's just usability for more people, and it's important. And I also feel like, yeah, yeah, I saw that on Twitter. I don't remember.
You stole it. I was going to give you credit.
I stole it from Twitter. No, yeah.
All right, it was good enough to steal. So that's good.
Yeah. So what was I saying? So also, the Me Too movement, I think, has changed things where people feel like they absolutely have to talk about diversity and inclusion, but you can't talk about diversity and inclusion if you're not including people with disabilities. So the movement is there in many different ways. I think we have to just tie it together with a bow and then really drive home to everybody involved in designing digital products that they've got to make it ubiquitous. I think we can get there, but it's still going to require a little bit more thought leadership and unification of the community to work behind these efforts.
So, you bring up a good point, and obviously in our business, we work a lot within the software development lifecycle, and we work a lot helping our customers integrate accessibility into the software development lifecycle, just like you're saying. And that doesn't mean that it's happening on a wide enough scale by any stretch. But I'm wondering, what do you feel the role of education is in that? Because one of the things that I look at is the fact that developers are coming out with all sorts of skill sets when they come out of school, and accessibility is not on the top of that list for sure. So how do you see that as maybe one of the frontiers that needs to be tackled?
Oh, absolutely. It's a big deal, because people, let's even just start with the coding, like the boot camps. People are going into the boot camps and they're not even learning HTML. They're learning that what HTML is divs and spans. And you put it, you just style the div and span and call it a day. They don't have the fundamentals, and they're just being taught like how to restyle everything. It's just wrong. And that's, I think, a really big one where we have to go after.
So maybe even educating the educators so that there's more awareness around what a proper curriculum might look like for developers, especially. And here's the thing that makes me afraid, because my son is a developer, right? And he's quite frankly had the benefit of me being his father and him listening to me talk about accessibility for a long time. And he understands, in fact, he's still in school, but he's doing an internship right now. And one of the things he brought to this internship was, hey, if we're going to do all this stuff, we need to make sure it's accessible. And he's absolutely right. And the higher ups are listening to him because of that. But he knows it's an important skill set. So what about his peers that are going to be introduced into the workplace, a workplace that is starting to demand accessibility more and more? I mean, this is getting outside of the type of things that you're trying to move, but they're going to get there and they're going to be behind the curve because they're going to know everything but. I think that's another kind of important angle that the educators almost need to know, that, hey, these kids are coming out of school lacking a skill set that's going to help them in the workforce.
That's true, though. I think, when it comes to developers and designers, they really learn on the job, the real stuff. You get some good fundamentals, but
I think you're right about that. I mean, it would give them the awareness, like it would, like my son did. The developers, at least, there would be a seed to where the developers are saying, hey, I know about this, and why aren't we doing it? And maybe somebody above them that's been around for a while going, huh, what? Oh yeah, maybe. But I agree with you.
It's the user. If the user asks for it, then the customer basically demands it. Then everybody will learn it. That's what we have to get to.
Yeah. So do you have any plans, or do you have any thoughts around doing something other than, or in addition to, I should say, GAAD, to try and affect some of these things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I had started. It's too bad I thought of this maybe like a week or so before we finished the State of Accessibility report. I was like, just at the last minute, okay, GAAD pledge. And the idea was to have people pledge that every week for like 52 weeks to do, I gave it like a list of things. You can see it at diamond.la/GAAD pledge. I provided like a list of things that people can do in order to improve the situation in the developer community. But it honestly was a bit of a last minute effort, and then like the post GAAD like exhaustion came out. So I'm planning to like revisit it and put it a little bit, be a little bit more, how should I say, plan it a little bit better, and then come back strong. But we've been collecting names. We've been collecting names of people that have joined the pledge, and once we're ready, then we'll send out emails. But really, the idea is to kind of build a community, and maybe this is cheesy or whatever, but it just came into my head, like build a GAAD army. So the idea being that a whole bunch of people come together, and let's say we pick 12 open source projects a year, and as a group, instead of here and there, as a group say, okay, now we're going to go for the React project. We're going to come in, we're going to take a look at what the issues are, try and engage the maintainers, the core developers, and say, let's find somebody who will be the accessibility ambassador. Let's create like a document that says that we pledge that we are going to be accessible, like have an accessibility statement. Because if they have a statement, and we can like standardize this and say, every open source project that says that they plan to be accessible, there's no longer an excuse for a bug fix to be ignored, because it's going to be part of their statement. We are an accessible open source. You know what I mean? So if we get that agreement first, and then we as a community all focus on this one open source project at a time, by the time we leave it and go on to the next one, hopefully we've returned a much more accessible project. And so if we're strategic about which ones we pick, and we amass a big enough army, GAAD army, right, then I think we can make a pretty big difference, because it's really the big frameworks that affect millions of users.
That's a really cool idea. That's a really cool idea. Have you guys thought about kind of a gamification of it? And I could see sort of a gamification, community support around a specific project where you're, through social media, you're talking about your progress, you're talking about your challenges, the community is sort of encouraging and all that. Are you guys looking in, or you must be thinking about those level of things? Is that kind of part of the plan?
Yeah, I trying to remember exactly. I came up with something similar. I just can't remember. Oh, yeah, I think like awards or something like that.
Right.
Most improved like open source project. I've written up
like Academy Awards for the GAAD Army would be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You'd have to get like a suit, dress up.
Right.
You'd have famous accessibility people come out, present the awards.
There you go.
Let's do it.
Yeah, but mostly it's about engaging the community, right? Because it's that's what I learned about GAAD is community makes the difference.
Well, and that's a good point, and that's why, like in my mind, I kind of view that as a community event. You've got a team working on whatever the project is that they're working on, but you have visibility into it from the community so that they are being, it would be for awareness would be the underlying reason, right? But also it would just create a lot of energy around the project and a lot of support around the project, and, create more momentum than it would if it just, because we all do these things in our own little boxes and nobody else necessarily knows about them. But this is a perfect example to make that public.
Yeah, the first thing I did for the GAAD pledge is I went to the React open source page and then looked at their like quick start, and then right in there was HTML. That's like, I think it was they skipped the heading or something like that, but it was basically an inaccessible right from there. So I posted a note, but it's all about hitting the right tone, because we don't want to go into the community and dictate to them. We want to like embrace them and inspire them to do a great job with accessibility rather than shame them, because that just doesn't work well.
Yeah, it doesn't work well. It's not appropriate. And the bottom line is that sometimes it's a big task. So are you going to ask somebody to come in and turn a battleship, to use your army analogy, right away? Or is it about, you know, I look at it like in terms of exercise. Whenever people have asked me for advice on exercise, I say, look, don't decide you're going to show up to the gym for an hour and a half a day. That's a big change to your day. Start doing something for a few minutes every day. And once that becomes habit, add to it, you know? So it's, you know, you really, I agree with you. I think taking these little steps to make changes, and as a community asking for it, respecting the fact that people are going to have to do that is huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you really have a great attitude, you know, about it. It sounds like it's no wonder you are where you are, because you're approaching it with so much respect and tact, and you really want to make a change. So kudos.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all about listening, and I'll just say this right out. I would not have approached it right had I not had Jennison as a mentor in the accessibility community. He is so smart, and he's taught me so much.
Yeah, I have. I've met Jennison on a couple of occasions, but I haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk to him. But every time his name comes up, nothing but respect for him. I hear such positive. People talk about him so positively, and he really is a very positive force in accessibility.
Yeah,
So, and
sure
lucky
changed
you
my
to be
life.
partnered with him. What's that?
Yeah, no, that it changed my life. You
Yeah,
know, meeting him, no question, that changed my life.
So listen, let's we got to wrap up here, right? But let's wrap up with a quick version of the story of how you guys connected, because I think it's such an endearing story, and such a humble, serendipitous beginning to this whole thing that 8 years later is a big Times Square GAAD, you know, thing going on, and companies like us are giving away stuff. So relay that story real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. My dad, who now passed away, but he was struggling with a website. Maybe I should tell you the full thing here. If you have like a couple minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. So my dad was trying to access a banking website, which shall remain nameless, and it was inaccessible. And I got really frustrated. He was a brilliant man. He spoke 10 languages, was a Holocaust survivor.
Wow.
And it was painful to watch him, you know, get older and not be able to access a website. And so I'm like, all right, we got to write this down. So I wrote a blog post. I'm like, let's create this Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It's almost exactly what was in that blog post. Let's create this day. We'll hit up the press. We'll like do all these things where we're going to learn about accessibility. Basically laid out the entire plan. And as soon as I felt like, okay, if we work really, really, really hard, you know, this can be something. And then I hit enter. And then after I hit enter, I'm like, well, you know, nothing's going to happen. Like there's no way this is going to turn into anything. But at the moment, like I had that inspiration. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't even smart enough to tweet this out. WordPress had an automated tweet thing. So it tweeted out my blog post. Jennison saw the tweet, goes to the website, and he says, this is a great idea. Let's make it happen. Wow. And yeah. And then a lot of like the names and accessibility followed along in that thread. It's really crazy because I finally met Jared from WebAIM. Because we had wanted to do something just like he did, and like then he came out with it right before, as we were still kind of planning it. And then I meet him, and then we connected like great. And then I look back on that thread, and he's right there in that thread. So it's not just Jennison; there are other names in there as well who later, you know, we've connected with. And so Jennison reads it. Let's make it happen. And we're like, okay, we know that he was in Toronto. I was in LA. We'll have one event in LA, one in Toronto, and at least something will happen on that day. And then in the very first year, there were already 16 cities doing it. India had like a governmental event, and it just blew up like from the first year, and then went crazy from there.
Wow. That's you know, and I think back to that original tweet and stuff, and it's like a historic artifact, you know what I mean? Yeah. Especially considering, you know, it's innocent beginnings, and then the people and, you know, of note, right, that jumped in and became part of it. What a cool thing. Well, listen, Joe, really, it's been great talking to you again. I'm sure we'll have you on again. You've got such interesting stories, and it's such an inspiring thing that you've done here. So I can't wait for the next update, right, to see what you're up. I want to hear. We'll link to the pledge that you so make sure we have that. You can send that right to our producer Marissa. And we'll put that on there so people can find it. I'd love to hear how that turns out. That's such a cool idea itself too. So great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is Mark Miller, thanking Joe Devon and reminding you to keep it accessible.
The IAP Interactive Accessibility Podcast is brought to you by Interactive Accessibility, the accessibility experts. You can find their Access Matters blog at interactiveaccessibility.com/blog.